in the process of their talking, the Chinese government knows a lot about the U.S. and the U.S. policy and how it's made. And they said to us, they said, how do we get the China story outside of New York and Washington, where the reporting is so biased and so, well, according to them, so biased, or it's just so negative. And really, for a foreign correspondent here, this is a great place to be because there are really a lot of quirky stories. So what the world reads about China predominantly is kind of a lot of these types of stories. But you don't get a feel for everything else that's going on. So that's a little bit, I try to strike as much objectivity. I'm not a China, I love it here. I've had a great run. I'm not a China apologist by any means, but there's more of an objective story that kind of sometimes you read in the public press. So a quick run. So I adapted it somewhat from the Rio, but change, milestones, and implications to our business. Change. One word, it's been unprecedented. I think unprecedented in any other country, anywhere else in the world. I think I'm fairly confident that I could say that. That was me when I came. I was a young me. When I came here, that's a picture of us in a different office building when my daughter was just born, and that is where she is now.
Wow.
So that is. I just want to. So we're talking. She's 14. I'm here 15 years, and this is a little bit. This I like to explain China through. This guy's a friend of mine here. He's Jim McGregor. He's at APCO right now. He was the Wall Street bureau chief back when I came here. He talks about China as a startup and a turnaround all at one time. And he kind of captures, it's because before 1949, it was a thriving country and with lots of innovation, and then through the Cultural Revolution, it kind of stopped. So it's kind of a turnaround, but also a startup because after 1979, when it opened up, it just was boom time. When I came here, everybody was riding bikes, and that's today. You can't, the bikes are gone. People used to ask me if I rode to work on rickshaws and things like that. It's the biggest market for, actually, when you hear about, in the U.S., the whole debate about China taking over everybody's jobs and so forth, the reality is that General Motors is building more cars today in China than they are in the United States. This was Shanghai, where the VCU folks just came. This is it today, 6 of the world's tallest 10 buildings. This was a road in Shenzhen in southern China in 1980. That's the road today. Now, I'm sure some of you, have you been to Sanlitun is where the Bar Street, okay? It's where everything happens here. Be careful there, but have some fun. But it's a lot of fun. This was when I came here, we used to go down there and get a cup of coffee. There was kind of outdoor markets there and so forth. This is Sanlitun today. This is the subway map in 2003. This is the subway map today. 13 lines. This was the first mobile phone in 1992. What's that? Now it's the largest mobile phone population in the world. This is my favorite. The Dongdan is on Chang'an Street. It's where you go by Tiananmen. This was an outdoor ad for one of the wine companies in 1980. This is the ad. So this is a fashion show in '84. We just did a big fashion show here for Burberry here, where they used the absolute leading. It was very cool. They brought a special technology company that came in, and it was a fashion show where people were walking across the stage and would just disintegrate because it was all holograms and so forth. So, holographic fashion show. It was fascinating. This is inside the department store in '86. This is department store today. You'll see that. So basically, it gives you a little bit of flair. And I'm going to just run through the numbers, but the GDP has just been 5 times, 6 times that of the U.S. we're supposed to China's going to take over, it's taken over Japan as the second largest economy, and I believe taken over Germany as the largest exporter, and by 2019, from a GDP perspective, it's expected to take over the U.S. in terms of GDP. The outbound, there's a huge push right now for China outbound. So China, the one thing that we're seeing a lot of, and we just opened up an office in New York, a China practice in the New York office, was because all the Chinese companies that want to access the United States but are having trouble. They actually, they don't know how to start in the U.S. They don't know, there's everything from regulatory issues to internal communications issues. So it's ripe with communications challenges, and we want to be at the forefront of that, so that's happening. This is a huge dynamic in China, but there's a lot of it used to be largely rural and a lot of farms. And all the farmers now are moving into the cities. So they have this huge migrant population. And they have trouble dealing with it. A lot of our clients from a community standpoint do a lot around, migrant workers and migrant population, the issues that come. But imagine, populations larger than the United States moving from location to location in everything from, and all the urban issues that they have there. So there's huge cities in China, and we'll have more mega cities than anywhere else in the world. This is it's just outstripped the urban population. 145 million numbers of migrant workers in China, the entire workforce of the United States. So it's not the entire population, but the workforce. There's a huge issue between rural, the one thing that you'll see a lot of, actually, the one way to understand China is, in its most simple form, is that this government, you're going to be fine here as long as you don't want to mess with the political establishment. For lack of a better word, mess with the political establishment. Say that in the microphone. This government cares about stability. So when something happens, when a foreign journalist gets detained, it's probably because they're really muckraking in areas where the government is worried about. When during the Olympics, a lot of clients wanted to do these massive events, outdoor viewing events, because the Chinese government didn't want people to gather in masses in one location. They put a kibosh on that. They really care about social stability. The biggest issue at the moment now, more than anything else, is the internet and what's happened in the Middle East. They are frightened by what happened by that, and they don't want that to happen. They also care, the rural unrest and the gap between the rich and the poor. So if you ever want to understand, if you ever say, wow, that is the most stupid thing I've ever seen in terms of policy, it probably is. But the only way to understand it would be someone somewhere thought that was going to challenge social stability. The whole consumer price index and inflation is a huge issue now. It's challenging social stability. When some kid of an official driving a BMW runs over somebody and thinks they're going to get away with it because their parents are in a position and they make a big stink about their parents, that's going to challenge social stability. They will address that. So it really is, a basic, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is really, they care first and foremost about social stability. So I have a colleague who came up with this, but really China has gone through 4 stages since it opened up in '79. China, in 1980s, China needed the world, so it was welcoming. It wanted as much international participation. In 2000 to 2008, kind of the WTO came through and China joined the world, so they were being put up to the same kind of measures as everybody else. After the financial crisis, China came out much more healthy than anywhere else in the world, and so it's kind of China rescued the world. And the big question that we're kind of debating and we go through is, what kind of leader is China going to be as it moves forward? So that's kind of what everybody that's been here for a long time. So milestones, this is just kind of my own walk through the years. The WTO was an inflection point in terms of the communications industry in what happened here. That China had to communicate. We had a surge in business, but it was everything from everybody who had issues that felt like they had the World Trade Organization to help them argue some of those issues. So the WTO was a huge inflection point. The Olympics was a huge, I would say, brilliant public relations maneuver to expedite social, environmental reform. And really, whoever the leader was said, if we're going to be, a global power, we're going to have to integrate more in the world, and this is going to force us to do so. And it really put the spotlight on China. SARS was another case whereby the SARS epidemic started in China. A lot of foreigners at that point left. SARS is a severe acute respiratory syndrome, whereby it's airborne. So if you're kind of in the same room as someone that has SARS, you have a potential of getting it. So in fact, some friends of mine were in businesses where they were on the same floor that someone had SARS, and they quarantined them. It was the first time I felt a personal challenge because my wife was in the media buying side of Ogilvy at the time, and we worked on the same floor, different businesses, same floor. But if someone got SARS, we would both be quarantined, and we have kids that we have to deal with. So how do you work through that? But we were here throughout. It's the first time there was like a run on rice and pneumonia and everything because people weren't going to go out of their apartments. But what happened from a communication standpoint is the Minister of Health said there's absolutely no problem in Beijing. They were kind of denying it the whole time. And while they're denying it, everybody's SMSing. This many SARS cases here, this many. And the world is reporting on China as the big bad boy in the world of pandemics. And so the global media reached such a force that the Minister of Health went out and said, we have no cases here. 15 days later, Time magazine uncovered a SARS hospital that had tons of people in there. There was a doctor whistleblower that came out, and all of a sudden the minister was sacked, and it changed the whole dynamic of how the Ministry of Health wanted to communicate. We actually got called in by the Ministry of Health afterwards to media train them, and we went through a lot of what the world expects of governments when dealing with pandemics. Changed the whole way the government communicates afterwards. Leadership change in Beijing. The Jiang Zemin, the previous establishment wanted to encourage foreign investment and so forth. Now, with the current establishment, and particularly this year, it's much more social harmony. We've had enough investment. We've had enough, multinational participation. We want to help our local domestic industries improve. In 2008, I put the Olympics in 2001 because that's when they won the Olympics. The Olympics was in 2008, as you all know. You probably saw a lot of the protests that were going on in advance of the Olympics during the torch relay. And we had about 10 clients at the time. One of the most I guess, memorable experiences for me was being on the phone with a professor who we deal a lot with, who in the middle of the protests in France and Europe, and this is when the world was just, nobody go to China. It's a terrible place to be. He came out and he said, we won the public relations battle. And I'm dealing I had about 10 crises. I had clients calling us up to write statements on what they should do and so forth. And I'm like, help me understand, because it doesn't look like this Olympics is going to happen. And he said, China is united. And the fact of the matter is, all the protests in London and Europe united people in China. So actually the Chinese were feeling, forget the rest of the world. We'll have a Olympics without people coming. But the Olympics are going to... And the fact of the matter is that from a social stability standpoint, there was never a time when China was more united than ever before, because they felt like the world was against them. The Sichuan earthquake, probably, it was 4 months before the Olympics launched, 3 or 4 months before, in some sick way, saved the Olympics. The response of the Chinese and the way in which it was, they positioned juxtaposed to what was happening in Burma at the time with the floods, it showed a much different approach. And really it was after that, all the public officials wanted to start to, maybe we should go out and talk more to the foreign press, because if we're being treated at least with some sympathetic way. So it was the tenor of the global coverage is changing. So there is a story that's getting out there beyond China as kind of a bad boy country. But if you look at like just the Economist cover stories about China, more than any other place, so the Chinese will come to us and say, we can't win. Everybody, there's just such a bias towards, demonizing China, that we can't win. So one worrying thing for me today is, years ago, the Chinese cared about the foreign coverage or being portrayed negatively. Now they feel like we can't help it. They're going to write something negative anyway. So anyway, implications to our business. The message. Before the message, we do a lot. You'll probably learning a lot about this, but it's all about the message. The message was before about commitment to China, investment in China, how we can work together in China. Now it's, can we work together with China to help you explore markets outside of China? So you'll see GE is helping to build trains in the US and India. But if you want access and to work really close in partnership with China, the more that you are exploring markets outside of China together. That's kind of a little bit of the way in which the messages change. This is not new, but gone from corporate interest to national interest. You'll learn a lot about this, I'm sure, in your studies, but the whole visual story. The world is spending less time reading. And so whether it's putting it in video or even thinking through, we worked for United Airlines, and we said, how can we get the message through that United has a direct route from Beijing to Washington? We found a George Washington impersonator. We actually did staged him coming out first of the first flight that came over. We had the journalists, the photo editors, and all on the tarmac when he came in here, and that was kind of the photo that was taking place that appeared in all the press. That actually went over the AP wire. So the message that Washington to Beijing direct flights was clearly through. So the visual message. The international press. The point I make here is people used to do press conferences that were just focused on local media and talking to the local press. Now all the Journal, the New York Times, they have more Chinese readers than they do reporters. So there's no real just China news. Whatever happens in China will be reported globally. Whatever happens globally will come into here. So And then the local press has evolved. I mean, it still has a ways to go, but the younger journalists are much more investigative, much more ambitious. And 15 years ago, I went to a press conference, and someone took the press release that we handed out and made a couple edits, and then gave me the phone number to fax it back to their office. Today, it's largely different and more professional. The whole digital world has changed the whole dynamic of everything. I mean, if there's anything that you need to do and you should do in the future, is all about digital. And we've got a digital lab here, but all of our clients' monies are shifting into how people are consuming information in new and different ways. And this is just a iconographic that we put forward that was just like, because Facebook's not allowed here for stability reasons. They have a number of different kind of companies that are doing similar things to Facebook. So we have a whole team of, we have a huge digital group in our company, but we have a whole huge Chinese digital group as well that's just making sure that. So that's basically my quick run.